Guys, what's up? Welcome back here to Intuitive Angling, and thank you very much for checking today's video out and making a little bit of time out of your day to spend it with me. I'm always grateful for that. And guys, today we're going to sort of give a refresher course, a jig fishing 101 little tutorial here in today's video. We've done quite a bit of jig stuff on the channel over the last 3 years, but you know, we're getting into what I consider some of the better jig fishing time of the year. And I just sort of wanted to go over some of the things that are really key in jig fishing. Now, jig fishing is sort of like jerkbait fishing in the term. It's a pretty complicated technique in terms, there's a lot of different variables to it. So what I wanted to do is I sort of wanted to give you guys a good foundation. If you are not real familiar with jig fishing, this is going to be really good for you. And also if you are a good jig fisherman, you probably pick up something here that you can use. But it's one of my favorite ways, if not my favorite ways, to catch a bass. So that's what we're going to get into today's video. And also, guys, real quick, just a reminder, we're about out of time on our Solar Bat series, my signature series glasses, my RB2 and my RB3 series sunglasses. During the month of November, you can get them at 50% off. I'll put the Solar Bat link in the description here if you guys want to check them out there. And I think you guys will really like these things. Really awesome pair of glasses. So much appreciated. Okay guys, let's sort of skim over the surface of the most important aspects of jig fishing here. And when I'm talking about jig fishing, I'm talking about just what I consider traditional jig fishing in terms of like pitching and flipping and maybe some casting. Now there's a lot of different types of jigs out there. You got your football head jigs, you got your swing head jigs, flipping and pitching jigs, you got your finesse jigs, casting jigs. A lot of the jig models, they change based upon the technique specific, because say for example a casting jig will have a pretty typical head on it, but usually it has a lighter wire hook because you're farther out on the cast with it, whereas a pitching and flipping jig will have a little bit stiffer hook on it, because you're using heavier line and thicker cover. Same with the football head jig, usually a little bit more of a wire hook on it. So one jig is not created equal. For example, you've got a finesse jig like this, which is real tiny, and then you've got a full size jig next to it. So a lot of different ins and outs to it. But the main thing is I want to go over what I consider the most important specific aspects to consider regardless of the type of jig you're fishing. Now these will apply to all different type of jigs. First of all, let's talk a little bit about color. To keep it simple again, we're going to talk in terms of dark colors and light colors. Now this has a lot to do with your light intensity and your water clarity. The dark colors are, your browns, your blacks, black and blue, black and chartreuse, solid black, usually with some type of a blue or dark trailer on it. Now, this is a real good color in off-colored water. If you have water visibilities like say under 2 foot and you've got cloudy or rainy days or early in the morning, a dark jig will work a little bit better than a lighter one out there. If you can get them to bite a black jig, another thing I'll talk about, little tip here, if you can get the fish to hit a dark jig, the fish are usually bigger. So a lot of times, even if, say I'm on the verge of the water clarity being a little too clear for a black and blue, a lot of times I'll stay with it, because if I can get a bass to bite it, it's usually a little bit larger size bass. Now the other end of it, you've got your more natural tones, like your green pumpkins and your browns like this. Now, again, this is for a little bit cleaner water, a little bit brighter light conditions. So I'm using usually the brown jig or the green pumpkin jig if that water visibility is over about 2 foot in visibility, usually matching it up with some type of a natural color trailer like a green pumpkin or a watermelon with that. Now there's different variations, because in the natural color jigs, you've got the browns like this brown rubber. This is one of my Blocked Old School jigs. And you've got like green pumpkins, you got peanut butter and jelly, you've got different color of watermelon and green pumpkin barbed wire colors. A lot of different things to choose of, but don't get caught up on specific jig colors as much as thinking in terms of a natural color versus a dark color and apply that to the water clarity and light conditions. That's going to be a big part of it. Another thing to consider, guys, is the trailer matchup on your jigs is also important. Now, one of the things that I can tell you about trailers is there's no right or wrong answer with it. I've got my favorites. My favorites are like the chunk type trailers, like this Zoom Big Salty Chunk. A lot of guys like the curly tail trailer. Some people like myself like to thread them on like a frog here. Some people, or excuse me, just hang them off the end like a frog. Some people thread them on the shank. I don't really think that there's one big piece of advantage to one or the other, with the exception of fish size. In general, if you use the larger chunk type trailers and put them on the end of the hook, it will produce a larger fish generally. And that's my confidence go-to. But a lot of it with the jig trailers and the jig colors, it's a matter of experimentation. Sort of like with jerkbait colors. I've got my favorites, and I've got other colors I probably never would consider trying. So when you're talking about terms of jig color and jig trailer, just let your imagination go wild. Try different combinations. Try something that looks good in the water. Maybe try some dyes with it. And if you get confidence in a certain color, it can work out good. One of my favorite colors, like I had in the thumbnail here, is a brown jig with a blue trailer on it. A lot of people never fish that, but it looks really good in the water. And that's the ultimate thing, is how that jig looks in the water. You want your jig to, I talk about this a lot in the videos I do, but you want your jig, like a lot of other lures, to stand out a little bit, yet blend in a little bit. There's a fine line there. And I can't really explain that unless like you were in the boat with me and I could show you. But in other words, you don't want your lure to drop it in there and for it to be invisible. Say for example, if we were fishing and the water visibility was 6 inches and I put my brown jig in 6 inches of visibility, it'd disappear. Whereas my black jig would silhouette and show up a little bit. So that's sort of what you're looking at. And vice versa, if I put my black and blue jig in 4 or 5 foot water visibility, it would stand out too much, and a brown would be a lot more natural and subtle looking. And then finally, this is, like I said, we could do a whole hour video, and I have on some of my advanced bass fishing channel. But finally, how you work a jig is really important. Now, there's a lot of different ways that you work a jig based upon the jig, type you're fishing. For example, on a football head jig, you're throwing that football head jig out and you're usually just dragging it like that. If you're fishing a little finesse jig, you usually throw that little finesse jig out there and you're just sort of like shaking it and pulling it back to the boat like that. But guys, I'll tell you what, my favorite way to work a flipping or pitching jig or a casting jig is I throw it out there and I don't want to pull it or shake it. I'm going to snap it off the bottom. So I'll just let it hit the bottom. I'll shake it maybe a little bit and then I'll snap it, where that jig comes up maybe 6, 8 inches off the bottom and falls back down. And there's something about the larger pitching and flipping style jigs, is when you pop that jig hard off the bottom, it sort of creates a reaction strike a little bit on the way down. And this is especially important if you're fishing your jig over some type of cover. Say if you're pitching it over a limb or a log or something like that, where it's actually draping over something, then that's really important to hop it like that off there. But anyway, guys, there's a lot of different stuff we could talk about. This is just a quick refresher course. I will put my, I got a whole hour-long jig seminar in one of my advanced bass fishing YouTube channel videos. I'll put that link in the description if you guys want to watch that video. So get comfortable with them, guys. You catch them on a jig, they're quality fish. It's a fun bait to fish, and I hope it helps you out. We'll see y'all later.